Now we're going to take time to go through and look at the different ways that we can display data whenever we have statistical analysis stuff that we're looking at. So to begin with, we have a line graph, and a line graph shows how data changes over time. So for this one, we have the amount of chocolate milk sold Monday through Friday, right? And here's the amount. So then you have your points, and then you connect them with your line. So for example, here's the school store sales amounts, and I want to make a line graph, right? So if I look, I have September through May, right? So I have 9 months. So across the bottom, I'm going to have the month, right? Make sure we label our axes, and across the top, I have the sales, all right? So we've got September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, and May. Okay, so then September was all the way up at 670. It looks like that was our max. So we'll maybe put up to 700. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Way up here. So there's 700. We'll put 3, 4, 500. And we'll do every 2. Alright, so September is all the way up around here. Then October was at 229, which is down closer to here. Then 300 for November. December was 168. January was 388, close to 400. January is 290, close to 300. February was 388, close to 400. March was 412. April 309, and May 198. Alright, not best, most exact, but good attempt. And then we're just going to connect these, and there is our line graph, right? And you do technically need to label these or name your graphs, and so these are school store sales. Okay, so there's a line graph. Now we're going to look at these murders, all right? So here's statistical data from 1996 to 2011 for murder rate in a town. I don't know what town. So we're going to use this data to do a lot with, right? So I took that same data and I've labeled it out here. Okay, so we're going to find the mean, median, mode, range, and standard deviation. Now, lucky for us, we can do all of this on the calculator, all right? So the first thing I'm going to do is put it in order. Alright, so here's everything in order. Remember your mean, you add everything up and divide it by how many there are. Right, so for this in particular case, we have 16 total pieces of data. Alright, so if we add them all up, we end up with 90.9. And then we're going to divide that by the 16. And whenever you divide by 16, we get 5.68. So there's our mean, 5.68. Right? The median is the middle of your data. Right? So I can start crossing them out. So I don't want to cross them all out because I want to use them. Right? So I've got 1. We'll just cross them out. 2, and then here, and then another one, another one, another one, another one. Alright. So then I get 2 in the middle. Well, lucky for us, they're the same, so my median is just going to be 5.6, right? If they weren't the same, remember you would just find the average of your 2 middle numbers. The mode is the number that occurs the most often. So in this case, we've got 4 5.6s, so my mode's going to be 5.6. Right? The range we haven't talked a whole lot about, but the range is going to be your max minus your min. So the max in this case is 7.4, and my min is 4.7, which conveniently reversed. And so I get 2.7 for my range. Standard deviation we're going to look at on the calculator, but we're not going to do it by hand yet. All right, so we are going to talk about how to do everything on the calculator now that we've figured it all out by hand. So if you remember on your calculator, Alright, to enter in my data, we press the Stat button and we go to Edit. Okay, I've already got all of our data entered in, right? When I scroll all the way down to the bottom, as if I put in my last piece, I should have one more, so L1 17. So that's, saying that I have 16 pieces because this is my 17th line. So you can double check, make sure you have the right amount. Right? You have two options. If you want to find just the mean or just the median, right? You can go second stat and scroll to math, and there's your min, your max, your mean, your median, your sum, all that good stuff, your standard deviation, everything, right? So for example, if I wanted to find the standard deviation, I would say enter, right? Oh, nope, let's clear out of there. Let me get back to home screen, then go second stat. Don't want to do it inside the table. Okay, and then I would come down here and press second number 1 because everything I'm working with right now is in L1. Press enter. So it's telling me my standard deviation is 0.68, right, which we can write down here. That's all we're going to do right now. We'll do it by hand later on. All right, so my standard deviation is 0.68. Okay, the other way of doing it is doing your one variable stats. Okay, so I'm going to go to Stat, over to Calc, and I want the first one variable because we're only working with L1. I'm going to press enter and then enter again. So here's my stats. So my mean is 5.68, which we got. Okay, my standard deviation is right here, this S, and that's the 0.68. Okay, there's my min, my Q1, my Q3, my max, and then my median, 5.6, which is what we said. The only ones that don't show up on here are your mode and your range, but those are very easy to find just by looking at your points. Okay? So next we're going to look at a histogram. Okay, so a histogram is going to be kind of similar to a line graph, but now we are going to put bars and we're going to have intervals going across the bottom, right, instead of exact months or something going down the side of time. So I'm going to draw my axes, and on the left this is going to be our, for this case, our murder rate. Right, and we're going to talk about the murders here. Okay, and actually I guess this is the frequency of the murder rates, and then down here are the murder rates. Alright, and what I mean by frequency is we're going to put our intervals down at the bottom, and then we're going to say how many times those murder rates appear in those intervals. So for example, I'm going from 4 to 7, right, or 4 to 8 technically, because my highest is 7.4. So if we just look at the integers, I'm between 4 and 8. So maybe my first interval down here will be 4 to 4.9. Okay, then my second interval can be 5 to 5.9, then 6 to 6.9, and we're going to go all the way to 7 to 7.9, because that passes my first one. So from 4 to 4.9, we have, 2. So it occurs twice. So up here, 3, 4, 5, I'm going to put a bar that goes up to 2 to show the amount of times it occurs in that interval. Then for 5 to 5.9, we've got from here to here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Whew, it's going to be way up here. So we got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right, did not do a good job with my scale. So then this bar is going to come all the way up to 11 and just make my graph look terrible. Okay, then for 6 to 6.9, we've got 2. So we're back down here at 2. And then we've got 7.4, just 1. Right? Whenever we look at our histograms, it tells us kind of where our data falls, right? Obviously for this one, most of our data falls between 5 and 5.9. Okay, we can use histograms to talk about the skewness of data and how it's skewed, whether it's skewed left or skewed right. Okay, and the skew is talking about being kind of pulled out. So like for example, if I have a bunch of bars over here, and then it keeps going and going and going, we would say that this is skewed right. Right? Oops, running out of room. Right? Whereas if it is kind of pulled this way, right, this we would say is skewed left because it's pulled out towards the left. And this first one was pulled out towards the right, so it kind of like keeps dragging on and on and on, where most of our data is on the left-hand side. Alright, so we're going to see these histograms again. Just remember, you put your intervals at the bottom, and then your frequencies go up the side. So it's how many times that your set of data appears in each interval. We're also going to look at a stem and leaf plot. Okay, so a stem and leaf plot, on one side we have our stems, and on the other side we have our leaves, hence the name stem and leaves. Right, and so the first thing you need to do is define your kind of like your base. Okay, so for this stem and leaf plot, all of my numbers are 2 digits with a decimal in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to say 1 and then put your bar and 0. So stem and leaf 1 0 is going to represent 1.0. You kind of have to define what everything's going to look like, right? Because that 1 0 could be 10. Okay, or it could be 100 or something depending on the data that you're using. In this case, we're going to say the number point a number, so that's going to be our base. So on the left hand side, we're going to go in numerical order, and we look at all of our stems. We've got 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we got 4, 5, 6, and 7. Those are all of my stems. So now I'm going to put my leaves, which is all the tens places. So for the 4s, I have a 7 and an 8, 4.7, 4.8. For the 5s, I have a 5.0, 4, 5, 5. So let's get those in. 0, 4, 5, 5. Then 6, 6, 6. And another 6. 7, 7, 7. And then for the 6s, we have a 3 and an 8. And for the 7, we have a 4. Okay, this is kind of similar to that histogram we looked at because you can kind of see where everything falls in intervals. Okay, you can find your median by looking at your stem and leaf plot, right? We could just start crossing off from each side. You just have to make sure you go in the right order. So from here, you're going right to left from the bottom, and from the top, you're going left to right. But that is all you have to do for your stem and leaf plot. Don't forget to write that initial, kind of like your key for what that stem and leaf plot is going to represent. And box and whisker we've looked at already. Okay, so for this one, we're actually going to talk about how to do on the calculator again. So I'm going to go back to the calculator. I've already got all of that data entered in, right? So let me get it back on. So we went stat, edit, and then there's all of my data in L1. So to see my box and whisker plot, I'm going to go to second, y equals, and turn that plot on, and change my type to box and whisker. So I'm going to scroll down and then scroll right until I get to my box and whiskers. Now there's two options. One shows outliers, one does not. We're going to choose the one that shows outliers because we want to make sure we show our outliers on our box and whisker. Now when I press graph, it's going to take me to a screen. This one looks kind of funky because all of my numbers are between 4 and 8, right? But it's not the screen I want to be able to see my box and whisker. So I'm going to go to zoom 9 because we're doing everything with statistics. So here's my box and whisker, and all of these dots are my outliers, right? So now if you press your trace button, it's going to take you to all of these points, right? So if I scroll all the way to the left, I've got 4.7 as an outlier, 4.8 is an outlier, 5 is an outlier, then my Q1 is 5.4. Alright, or sorry, my minimum, that's not an outlier, is 5.4. My Q1 is 5.45, my median is 5.6, my Q3 is 5.7, and then my max is not an outlier, is 5.7 as well. Then it jumps to my other outliers, 6.3, 6.8, and 7.4. Remember to find your outliers. You have to do 1.5 times that IQR, right, that interquartile range, which goes from Q1 to Q3, right, and then you're going to take Q1 and subtract that number, whatever 1.5 times your IQR is, and anything to the left of that is an outlier, and take your Q3 and add it, and anything to the right of that is an outlier. Alright, so for our last one, very quickly, we're going to come back and do a line graph on the calculator. So here's the calculator. I've got my plot 1, but now I've got the second one highlighted, which is a line graph. And whenever you do that, you have L1 and L2 pop up because we are now looking at time as well as the murder rate. Right, so I'm going to just change mine real quick to L2, to second L2, and switch this one to L1. Alright, and then the reason I did that was because I already had my info in L1, my murder rate, and my time then became an L2. So I want to switch those so that my time is my X value, so that's L2. I'm going to go to zoom 9, Give it a second, and there's our line graph. Right? So the same idea, but now we have x and y, so just make sure that you put 2 in your stat edit. And that is your line graph.